Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. Welcome to today's Grain Market Blast with myself and the amazing Angie Setzer. Just before we dive in, let me get rid of the legal department. As usual, nothing to discuss on this Spaces session constitute trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ Global Limited, traders PIQ or PIQ Suite, or indeed the hosts, which, as you know by now, is the hostess with the mostess, Mrs. Angie Setzer.
Woohoo!
And woohoo! And myself, Mr. Ryan Paisley. Woohoo!
Woo! Even better.
What day is it?
I
It's
don't know.
Wednesday.
What
It's
day
hump
is it?
day.
That's what. Woohoo! Hey, you guys. How are you doing today? Happy Wednesday. You're already halfway through, and we're over halfway through February. So I am pumped. What do we have to talk about? Nothing. All right, let's have a good day. We'll see you later, right?
It's off to the pub. I'll see you there. First
There is nothing happening now. I don't even know where to start because I feel like there's this multitude of things that are taking place that, when it comes down to it in the agricultural markets and all of these things, growing up in the industry and kind of watching all we get, sorry, I had a phone call there, but we get the same old news, or it's kind of one of those things where we tend to focus a lot on USDA numbers, supply and demand numbers, all of these things. And right now, currently, yeah, that's great. But all of the developments that are happening when it comes to the geopolitical space and your trade space and all of that are the things that we're really trying to focus on the most. And so I guess let's start with Trump on trade, since it's important maybe to see what we have learned here over the last 24 hours, 48 hours, what have you. But really yesterday we got news late in the day, right, that we have another round potentially, or we have other tariffs that could be added in. We should get more in the way of clarity on that today. We're talking pharmaceutical drugs now and semiconductor chips imports. And I'm trying, and maybe you have some thoughts on this, are we triple stacking these? You can't triple stamp a double stamp, I didn't think, but it looks like, basically we're going to do reciprocity, potentially then see the steel and aluminum tariffs. Right.
And then it depends what it depends what time of day it is and what the last tweet
who you're listening to.
It's reciprocity, but also if you pardon my French, if you tickle his balls, he'll do a reduced rate for you. Seems like there's a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts, which kind of makes it fun for watching the headlines. But
from under
people that are. I don't envy people that are having to hedge, because it's like, well, what do you do?
Yeah, what is the mood? What is the sentiment? What is the thought today? And so, as we work our way through it's February 19th today. So we're 9 days before the end of the month because it's not a leap year. And we have just a handful of days after that, right? We're looking at 3 weeks, basically, before we're supposed to have some sort of return to conversation with Mexico and Canada. And we've kind of abandoned that. They were the first round. We were tariffing. It was going after that. And then we really haven't heard much in that respect. We haven't heard much out of China. We have heard out of the EU. And so one of the things that I want to kind of point out when talking about the European Union and some of the more recent headlines that we've seen, the announcement yesterday, or the announcement that you saw floated by leaked by the Financial Times here over the weekend, and then reiterated by Reuters here yesterday. And then finally, the first draft was published this morning with the European trade limits or trade restrictions, European Union trade restrictions that you're seeing. I think maybe not, maybe Trump coming in has kind of pushed them a little bit more, but you've seen some really tight production practice controls in the European Union as a result that has really raised or increased the cost of production, but no one had taken into consideration kind of one of those unintended consequences sort of things, right? We're going to limit our farmers' ability to produce high yielding crops potentially, and people will argue that some of their limitations don't necessarily do that, but I'm not here to discuss that today. Really what you're looking at is you've seen this increased cost of production, and then you've had imports take place, because economics are economics. Imports of cheaper food products and things like that coming in and displacing some of this domestically produced, I will say domestically produced in the EU, foodstuffs, soybeans, corn, wheat, whatever it may be. And so the farmers have been arguing for a while. I believe they've been arguing against the regulation and the regulatory limitations that they've been seeing. But the EU leaders are like, hey, we hear you. We're just going to drive up food costs by probably limiting imports. But that'll be something that we discover in 5 years. not
This is it,
today.
right? Exactly
Um,
that.
so that's what you're seeing with the EU. The European Commission released their vision for food and agriculture here this morning, and that will be something that a lot of folks will kind of say, the European Union is so upset with Trump, they are going to limit their imports of food. They're not the same. One thing, causation is not or correlation is not
Yeah,
causation or
yeah,
whatever. You know what I mean? Like maybe this kind of sped up that process, but this will be something that we're watching for a while. But on the flip side, one of the things that I saw that caught my attention that I think really is something that we have to pay attention to when talking about, the tickling of the bees, is that, the U.S. paper and pulp industry is pushing that the U.S. be determined or classified as a deforestation free country. And so there had been talk floated with the EU when they were working through their deforestation regulations and pushing that implementation of those rules back a year. There had been talk that you would have certain zones that would be labeled or could be labeled as deforestation free. Now, the EC did not say that that was something that they were going to do when they had adjusted everything, but now you're starting to see more in the way of the administration really pushing for classification of the US as a, either deforestation free or a low risk supplier. And so I do think that you could see that kind of tossed out there as a negotiation tactic. And in the long term, long game, 4D chess, whatever you want to call it,
So sorry,
it ends
does
up benefiting the US.
this increases like the attractiveness of pulp and paper from these areas, right? Because
Yes.
it ticks in the SG box and all that.
Yeah, if it's
Yeah,
deforestation free, if you automatically are listed as deforestation free, then you don't have to jump through all the hoops. You're still
right.
going to have different checkups, I'm going to say, but it's far more, from what I'm understanding, Scouts honor than it would be if you
Yeah,
were medium level risk or even high level risk. Now, where Brazil falls into this, obviously, we'll have a lot to say about competition, but I'd just be really careful. My point in all of this is like make sure that you're assessing the change in trade from where it's coming from to a certain extent,
yeah.
in this instance especially, and so that'll be something that we'll be paying attention to, and I think it'll give us another piece to negotiate when it comes to all of these negotiations that are coming, because the European Union and a lot of European countries right now, we're kind of it's been a very hard 4 weeks for a lot of them, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they already knew how Trump was going to be to a certain extent, but I think he's been even more Trumpy towards Europe here than they expected,
Well, yeah, I
perhaps.
think, and I think it's definitely not, it's definitely not unrelated to the fact that European leaders, especially, have been very vocal in how Trump is anti-democracy, he's the demigod,
Mm-hmm.
and all this malarkey. So and he's like, well, you know what? I've got a bit of a stick that I can whack you with, so why wouldn't I?
Yes.
I think it'll be an interesting one. I think, obviously, again, for those that aren't aware, we've got the German elections on Sunday, and that'd be an interesting one. Just for those that aren't aware, the centre right are, we're talking betting markets. We're talking like 100 to 1 on odds on. So like it'd be extremely unlikely that the two centre right parties won't take the lead and take it away from the left. So again, we'll see what the rhetoric is from them, because if they come out, if the new leaders of Germany come out much more pro-Trump, again, everything that we've learned over the last 4 weeks gets undone.
It's the
So
last 4 years. I mean, you're
well,
really
there you go.
talking
Yeah,
about,
exactly. Yeah,
you're talking about a complete dismantling of Obama diplomacy
yes,
basically
yeah.
in 3 weeks, 4 weeks time. Like, and that's the part that we're watching is that, Obama had really worked to tighten, and Biden, for that matter, if you want to say that, but worked to tighten their alliance with the EU. We were the West, right? And we were the access. It was almost like a return to the axis of evil versus whatever at the start of the Russian war. And now we're seeing it to where it could be Trump, China, and Xi, or Trump, Putin, and Xi. And a lot of people, we can't wrap our minds around this, like,
Yeah.
including myself, on what it could be in long term. But it's definitely something to be paying attention to, because it will have huge implications, not only when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, which we have the U.S. envoy in Ukraine today. We have seen Zelensky. That's the other thing, talking about geopolitical changes. To see Trump pushing for Ukrainian elections now is a huge shift, I feel like, and something that could really take us out of the frying pan and potentially into the fire, because a shift in leadership with all of this uncertainty, with the peace negotiations, with all of these things, It's going to be interesting. Like there are a ton of moving
Yeah,
pieces, and with Ukraine and Russia both being large food producers, all of these little tiny things have massive butterfly effects
yeah,
on what this looks like. 6 months, 6 years, 10 years down the
yeah.
road.
And just in case anyone missed it overnight or late yesterday, depends on what time zone you're in. Trump actually used probably his most hawkish language against Zelensky. Came out and said,
Yes.
where's the money gone? You're a
Mm-hmm.
bad leader. All of this kind of stuff. So that's language we haven't seen at all. So
4% approval rate, which isn't true. Like that's the
yeah,
Kiev Independent put out that it's it is still around 50 per them. We'll see. And some of these other things. And so that was part two of what I saw that I think is important to kind of recognize is that Zelensky, not only has Trump come out and kind of throw some barbs, Zelensky responded, the $500 billion mineral plan is not a quote serious conversation. And then he said that Trump also needs to get out of his disinformation bubble. And so it's going to be interesting to see because Zelensky didn't deal with Trump in the first administration. Like he came in, he came in late, I guess, in the first
yeah,
round.
no, exactly.
And so it's going to be one of those things that we're going to be paying attention to because it has massive, like I said, implications as we go down the road. Last thing, and then we'll call it a Wednesday that we're paying attention to, is we have seen, and I've said it for the last couple, 3 weeks here, since, basically the inauguration and even beforehand, we want to see Trump say something nice about biofuels. We wanted to see him say something
Yeah,
nice about biofuels. And I forgot about it yesterday because the extended weekend had washed my brain. We did see late in the day on Friday, and shout out to Corey Levinsky if you are not following him. I've got to get down here to find the exact quote, but if you're not following him, you're missing out. He's got it's biofuels law, I think biofuels law is his handle, and he is a great follow to kind of stay on top of the developments that are taking place in biofuels, in renewable fuels in general. And he did find the White House put out an executive order issued today that kind of listed what they called amazing national assets for the U.S. Biofuels was listed in there. And so I think that's super important. And we did hear our new Ag Secretary Rollins say yesterday and in a handful of other interviews that the administration is focused on biofuels as one of the sources of energy independence that is great for America, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's been one of the things that we wanted to look for because the first administration wasn't a great friend to the
yeah.
industry. And so now I think it's clear that they are looking at this as, in the Renewable Fuels Association came out yesterday, and I agree with them 100%. If you want to stop worrying about having to come up with new rounds of subsidies for farmers, figure out ways to kind of reinforce the biofuel industry and the renewable fuel industry in the country. And let us become exporters of our energy and, yeehaw. So that's it. Markets are a little mixed this morning. We obviously broke out above important levels yesterday. March corn traded up above $5 for the first time since last May. I would not be the least bit surprised to see a bit of a setback. Some people might be like, oh, golly, that's disappointing. But I don't know. I feel like that's what we've seen. Farmer selling has slowed big time. So we're starting to see basis recover and some other things that are really interesting that I don't think a lot of folks anticipated to see. And so we'll see what today brings, trade announcements, all that good stuff. And giddy up, yeehaw. We'll go from there.
Awesome. Just whilst you're talking about biofuels, because I made a mental note to speak to you about this yesterday. So I've decided to rewatch The West Wing, which I don't know if anyone's seen that series, but it's
Oh,
an
yeah,
excellent series, right? And so bearing in mind that this was first aired, season one was first aired in 1999. I think it's the third season in. They're having a massive debate about biofuels and how no one can get a clear-cut answer on them. And I was like, we've been saying this for now like 20
That's
years.
funny. And in 99, though, I'm old enough to remember I started in 05. And so the RFS was 2006. Like I can remember the market rallying the day after Bush's State of the Union address, where he discussed RFS and biofuels and all of that. And I think that was January of 06. And just after that, the entire industry was put on its head. You know what I mean? Like we saw so many changes that took place, and we're still fighting the same thing. But the one thing I will say about ethanol for sure that I don't think a lot of folks really recognize, and they've been nervous about it with Doge and some of these things, is like ethanol replaced MTBE, which is
Yeah.
an oxygenate in gasoline that is thought to cause cancer and be problematic when it comes to water contamination in water, yada, yada, yada. And so we have basically a flat 10%, whatever gasoline we use in this country, 10% of it, around 10% of it's going to contain some level of ethanol because of that replacement. And so, yeah, we'll see. Now we just have to focus on exports to be able to jump over our blend wall.
Exactly that.
So,
Well,
so
Angie,
yeah.
thank you so much as always. Listeners, thank you as always for tuning in, especially our regular listeners. Whatever you're doing today, be it trading or out in the field or whatever, just keep it easy, keep it tight, stay safe, and we will see you all tomorrow. Take care.
Yes, have a good Wednesday.
And you.